Good morning. Superintendent Larry Snelling. This morning, we're here to address a tragic incident that took the life of an 11-year-old child and a mother who was brutally attacked in an incident that should have never happened. Before I get into some of the details of what occurred, I'd like to introduce some of the members who are standing here with me today. I'd like to introduce Chief of Detectives Antoinette Ursitti, Deputy Chief of Detectives Kevin Bruno, Area 3 Detective Commander Rodney Hill, the 20th District Commander Jimmy Baer. We have Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox, who is standing here with us. I'd like to thank her for her presence. And 40th Ward Alderman Andre Vasquez, and thank you for being here. And thank you for standing with us on this day where we have to report out something tragic. We're here to announce first-degree charges against the violent offender who fatally stabbed an 11-year-old boy and critically injured the boy's 33-year-old mother. Let me start by saying this is something that should have never happened. This offender, who I will not dignify by naming, was just paroled from prison the day before he brutally attacked this family. He's a convicted felon with multiple felonies in his background. He was out on parole while still serving a 16-year sentence for home invasion where he caused injury. This was the second time being released on parole. When he was first released on parole, he violated the order of protection against him and was taken back into custody by the Department of Corrections. He has 3 orders of protection violations against him. Again, this is something that should not have happened. The day after he was released, he entered the home of the family and took the life of an innocent 11-year-old boy. The boy's mother was stabbed multiple times, and she had an order of protection against this offender. Her 5-year-old son was also present and witnessed this attack. We have to imagine what that 5-year-old is going to have to deal with the rest of his life after witnessing something so brutal. When we talk about trauma, just imagine the level of trauma that this 5-year-old is suffering through. This mom's life is now forever changed. Along with being brutally attacked, stabbed multiple times, dealing with that trauma, she has to face the fact that she will never see, touch, hug her 11-year-old son. She's lost him forever. We will continue to show support for this family, because as a department, we want to make sure that we reach out. Our officers who arrive on the scene witness this level of brutality, so we have a clear understanding of what it looks like and what these families and victims are going through. And I've said it before, I'll say it a million times again. We have to continue to support our victims. We have to have a focus on the victims. When I think about some of the things that have happened, I ask the question, where's the outrage? There are a lot of things that people have shown outrage for in this city, but an 11-year-old boy lost his life brutally. A woman stabbed brutally in a domestic attack. Where is the outrage for this family? Let's focus on the victims. First thing I'd like to do is thank Area 3 for the hard work and quick action that they took in getting charges approved for this offender. I'd like to thank every member of the Chicago Police Department who were a part of working to quickly apprehend this offender so that he could not offend again. I cannot say enough about how hard our department members, our police officers, our detectives are working to bring a level of justice, if we can call it that, to families who have been victims of brutal attacks. And I'd like to say thank you to each and every member of the department who is involved in this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this over to Chief Ursitti, who is going to give you some details about what occurred. From that point, you'll get to hear from State's Attorney Fox and Alderman Vasquez. So, Chief.
Good afternoon, Antoinette Ursitti, Chief, Bureau of Detectives. I want to reiterate what Superintendent Snelling just said. It is important right now that we focus on supporting the survivors of this attack and all those affected by this tragedy. Our deepest condolences are with them. The 37-year-old male offender has been charged with 1 felony count of first-degree murder, 1 felony count of attempted first-degree murder, 3 felony counts of home invasion with a dangerous weapon, 1 felony count of armed robbery with a dangerous weapon, 1 felony count of aggravated domestic battery, 1 felony count of unlawful use of a weapon by a felon, 1 felony count of violation of an order, prior violation of order of protection, and 1 issuance of a warrant for parole violation. Investigations like this are never easy, especially when they involve children. Immediately upon learning of this incident, Area 3 detectives responded and began collecting evidence and witness statements. During the investigation, detectives learned the 33-year-old female victim was in a prior relationship with this offender more than 15 years ago. This offender has a history of domestic abuse, and as the superintendent mentioned, is a convicted felon who has had previous order of protection violation convictions. The offender was serving a 16-year sentence for home invasion and aggravated assault when he was paroled and placed on electronic monitoring this past October. While he was on parole, he threatened the female victim via text and also showed up at her home. He was sent back to prison in February for this parole violation. The offender was released on parole on March 12th. The day after he was released, he returned to the victim's home where he attacked her and fatally stabbed her 11-year-old son. Her 5-year-old son was also inside the residence, but was not injured. Video evidence shows the offender running from the scene with the knife used in the incident, which was later recovered, as well as other belongings. Several individuals were able to provide important information that led to the identification of this offender, who was taken into custody hours after the stabbing. I want to acknowledge the Area 3 detectives who spent the past 2 days investigating and securing charges in this case. I also want to thank every officer who responded to the scene and everyone who assisted in this case. This was a coordinated effort that included detectives, 20th District personnel, the Area 3 Area Technology Center, evidence technicians, the Area 3 Homicide Investigative Support Team, and the U.S. Marshals Great Lakes Regional Fugitive Task Force. Together, these men and women brought swift closure to a brutal crime of violence against a mother and her son. I'd now like to introduce Cook County State's Attorney, Kim Fox.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us here today. I stand here with Chicago Police Superintendent Larry Snelling, Chief of Detectives Antoinette Ursitti, and Alderman Andre Vasquez, united in our sorrow and our resolve following a tragic event that has deeply affected our community. As you have heard, we are here to announce the charges filed in this heartbreaking case involving the murder of an 11-year-old boy and the attempted murder of his mother. a crime that has shocked our city to its core. The charges, if you've already heard, are first-degree murder, attempt first-degree murder, and home invasion. The defendant will appear in first appearance court at 11:30 this morning. The State's Attorney's Office has filed a motion to detain. We believe that he is a threat, as obviously indicated by the horrific nature of this crime, as well as his actions post-parole. This was not just a vicious and violent attack on an 11-year-old boy and his mother. It was an assault on the very fabric of our community, targeting the most vulnerable among us. An innocent child's life was taken as he tried to protect his mother far too soon. And a mother was attacked in what should have been the safest place for her, which was her home. As the superintendent has mentioned, this defendant has a history of domestic violence and had only been recently released from serving a sentence from a prior conviction. The victim had an order of protection against him from previous encounters, and this history paints a disturbing pattern of behavior which emphasizes the importance of the filing of the charges today. I want to express my deepest condolences to the family and the friends of the victim. The unimaginable pain of losing a child, combined with the trauma of this violent act, is destabilizing. We stand with you in your grief, in your quest for justice. I also want to thank, once again, Superintendent Snelling, Chief Rossetti, Alderman Vasquez, the Chicago Police Department, and the Cook County State's Attorney's Office for their collaboration and leadership in getting us to this moment. Their unwavering support and dedication have been crucial. Together, we stand in our commitment to serve and protect our communities. I also want to extend a heartfelt thanks to our dedicated team of prosecutors, investigators, and staff whose tireless efforts have brought us to this point. I want to commend Kim Ward, Jennifer Dillman, and Erica Barnes of our Felony Review Unit for working collaboratively with our partners in law enforcement to bring us to this day. Your commitment to justice in the face of such tragedy is a testament to the strength and the integrity of the good people of the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. Our office is committed to vigorously prosecuting this case. We understand the significance of these charges and do not take this responsibility lightly. We will ensure that the legal process is thorough, fair, and just, and that this defendant is held accountable. As we move forward, let us all remember the life lost and the lives forever changed by this act of violence. Our commitment to justice is unwavering, and we'll do everything within our power to see that justice is served. In closing, I ask for the community's support for this family and for the victims. And as the superintendent said, a collective effort among us all to address and prevent such future acts of senseless violence. I am confident that together we can make a difference. With that, I'll turn it over to Andre Vasquez.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. First, I wish we weren't here to have this conversation. What occurred this past week, just 2 blocks from where I live, was an attack not just on a family, but an attack on a whole community. I take some solace on the fact that what we're seeing is a department and a government working together to make sure that there is accountability. And I want to thank Superintendent Snelling, Commander Beyer, all the detectives for all the amazing work, the State's Attorney's Office for making sure this was a priority. As you all have heard, there was a family and a woman and children who were hurt. The young man's name is Jaden. Jaden, in a moment, trying to get to school, right? The door opens up, and he does what anyone would do if you see your family in danger. He tries to defend his mother. He was a victim of this kind of attack. I've lost an older brother to gun violence. My heart right now is in pain for the 5-year-old who had to witness any of this. And so last night, there was a vigil held at the property. What I saw out there was about 80 children ages 10 to 14 years old, that speak to how popular young Jaden was. He was popular in his school at Pierce Elementary. He was a member of his local dance troupe. And so I think about not just the family, but everyone in the community that's affected. But what we did see was everyone coming together. And so although we know this is one chapter in the story and we want to see accountability and for justice to be served, there's a lot more work to be done to make sure that the family, that staff at the school, that the community all have the support systems they need, that we look as a government to see what more can be done to support victims and some survivors of domestic violence. There are the opportunities for everyone to come together and help each other out, but none of this is going to be easy. None of us are alone. And as we try to mourn together, we know that we're together as we move forward. And so anything that we need to do as a city to help empower the detectives, officers, state's attorney's office to make sure that no incidents like this ever occur, and anyone, whoever even thinks about this kind of behavior is held to account, we're going to do. It's a tough city to live in some days. I think we all know, and we all look at the news. And I apologize because sometimes I might feel a little jaded and desensitized because of what we see. But this is something that we know if we don't get ahead of domestic violence issues everywhere, there may be other cases. And so I just want to thank everyone here for all the work that you've done and look forward to justice being served. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman. First of all, let me just mention one thing with everyone standing here. This was an effort by everyone. I'd like to thank State's Attorney Fox and the State's Attorney's Office for working quickly with our detective division to get these charges approved and to bring some justice to the family. I'd like to thank Alderman Vasquez for being here and everybody who is standing here together, because this is the important part of it. We could not have done this without everyone working together. I also have to thank those witnesses who came forward and provided information. All of those things help in these cases. When we work together as a team, we can bring some justice to some of these families who have been victimized. It is important to see us standing here together because this is the only way we're going to get to the bottom of public safety in the city of Chicago. So I'd just like to thank everybody here for working collaboratively on getting this done. Before we take any questions, I'd like to just provide some information for resources that we can reach out for. Our Crime Victim Services Unit is available at any time to anyone who's been affected by this tragedy and needs support. They can connect you to resources. You can reach the Crime Victim Services at 312-745-6340. Again, Crime Victim Services, the number is 312-745-6340. What's more important are those who are affected by domestic violence. And our domestic violence hotline, the number is 877-863-6338. Again, 877-863-6338. I think this incident highlights the importance of staying on top of domestic violence issues. This highlights the suffering that this woman has been dealing with for years, and it couldn't have ended in a worse tragedy. Luckily, again, she's still here, but look at the trauma that she's going to have to live with for the rest of her days. We have to take a closer look at domestic violence, especially those that include repeat offenders, stalking. We have to protect these victims. We cannot wait until the tragedy happens to decide we're going to do something about it. That's the tail end of it. That's working backwards. We have to prevent these things from happening. With that, we'll take whatever questions you may have.
More insight into how he knew where she lived? Did he previously call the apartment complex to find out if she lived there, or did he at all list that address for parole?
The address where our victim lived was not where this individual was paroled from, if that is your question. The arrest took place where the offender resides and where he is paroled from, on the 4400 block of South Cottage Grove, just a few hours after everything happened that morning. In terms of locating and knowing that she would be there at that time, at this point there is no further information that we have to provide.
Hi, this is Maria Reyesa from Univision. I have the question is, what was he released from prison, the suspect, if he had an extensive record of violating the order of protection?
Well, what I can tell you is I don't have a good answer for that. Obviously, that would be a question for the Illinois Department of Corrections. My feeling is that he should not have been. Violated parole, he violated an order of protection, and it involved the same type of crime that he was paroled for. So this is someone who should not have been on the street.
Sure. It's a point I want to reiterate that the state's attorney had said. This tragedy happened inside of the residence, which is where we would expect everyone feels safe. And what we know throughout the course of the investigation is that as she was leaving for the day to take her children to school, he did force his way into that residence, and then the brutal attack took place.
Can you tell us any more about the mom's condition? She was reportedly pregnant at the time of this?
At this time, the detectives had a conversation with her. I believe it was an hour, maybe 2 hours long. So it appears that considering the circumstances, she's doing okay right now. So she's speaking, and she was able to speak to the detectives. Yes, yes.
Christian Picos with ABC Chicago. This is a question for Ms. Fox. Ma'am, how can the public have confidence that the criminal justice system is working if known violent offenders like this are being allowed out on parole?
You know, certainly, as I said, this is a horrific and tragic case. He was found guilty of having committed a prior act back in 2015, was sentenced to a 16-year sentence, and was released on parole last year. As I say to many people, most people who go to prison are given the opportunity to be released and not serve a lifetime sentence. What I would say to those, particularly those who are enduring domestic violence, is that we have mechanisms in place like orders of protection, domestic violence court, where if people feel that they are not safe or that someone is in violation of their safety, that they can go. This is a horrific case. I don't have a word of assurance for this mother who lost her son, who will have lifelong injury, both physical and mental, related to what happened here. But I will also say that there are people who are working in our criminal justice system, police officers, prosecutors, parole and probation officers, who try every day to ensure that things like this don't happen. I think this is why it grips us so, because it is so shocking and so glaring. And so what I will say is that there should be confidence in the criminal justice system, and that we would hope that incidences like this are rare. However rare, this is horrific. And we need to do an evaluation, particularly in this case and others, to ensure that there were no gaps in the justice system that will allow for a dangerous offender to commit the acts that he did. And as you heard the superintendent say, that there are questions, and there are questions that need to be examined and truthfully answered so that we can prevent something like this from happening in the future.
sometimes, I'm not sure who this question is for, but are you indicating in the charges that this woman had an active order of protection against this individual? And if that is the case, then why wasn't he charged with a violation of an order of protection when she reported to police that he came to the home and was sending threatening text messages?
Yeah, go ahead.
The charges are going to reflect an issuance of a warrant. And what that charge is for is the violation of parole. And the terms of that parole within it is the violation of the order of protection.
Okay, so there was an active order of protection?
Correct.
Okay.
Brandon Eisen with WBBM News Radio. This question is for S.A. Fox. This might seem redundant, but it seems like the emergency order of protection was denied. But even clearly, even with an order in place, sometimes these violent incidents still do happen. Do you have any advice or suggestions if the courts and police are unable to protect vulnerable and immediate response? Is there a hotline to call, advocates that you can suggest that will provide temporary wraparound services, including protection?
It's not a redundant question. I should be clear. There was an order of protection that was in place, a lifetime order of protection given to this victim in this case years prior. And so it was not new. This is a defendant who was aware that there was an order of protection in place, and so that sheet of paper was not deterring him from doing what he was bent on doing. I will be honest, I'm struggling this morning. Having to do this work, and we all do this work, imagine these officers showing up at a home and seeing an 11-year-old boy bleeding out who was trying to defend his mother. The issue of domestic violence, as the superintendent said, is something that we need to focus exponentially more on. Having grown up in a home where I witnessed domestic violence, having understood what it looked like to run into a room and try to protect a parent, it's very difficult to say that the system itself can stop bad people from doing bad things like what happened in this home. There are resources that are available at the Cook County State's Attorney's Office through our Victim Witness Unit. There are resources available at the Domestic Violence Courthouse at 555 West Harrison. There are a number of domestic violence organizations who are working in the city of Chicago and Cook County throughout all of our communities, and we can make that information available as well. But I want us to be mindful of the fact that this was a person who was determined to do what he did. And we have to make sure that we have resources available for survivors to be able to have a place to go if they're trying to leave a domestic violence situation, that we have to have resources available for the children to support them, not only for this young boy who lost his life, but as the superintendent mentioned, a 5-year-old who bore witness to the murder of his brother and the attempted murder of his mother. And so victim services, not just for, the direct victims of domestic violence, but for their families and those who support them. And so it's not a redundant question. I think we should ask the question every day. What are the resources available for people enduring domestic violence and gender-based violence? And have that information available. We will make that information available through our office. As you said, as you heard, the commendable work by the Chicago Police Department of having victim services available in the immediate aftermath to provide not just for that family, but for the community. As Alderman Vasquez mentioned, their children. I had a text message from a friend of mine whose daughter knew Jaden. And that child, who wasn't in that home, is also going to be suffering for a really long time. And so it's not redundant. We should continue to ask the question. But I think we have to remind you that we are responders to violence. We need to make sure that we have violence prevention strategies in place and resources for survivors to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to get them out of situations before they have such dire consequences.
Sarah Molina, CBS Chicago. I don't want to call this redundant. At this point, this is really a clarification request. We keep hearing about this order of protection. Ms. Fox, we just heard about this as a lifelong order of protection. We're not finding any record of a temporary or a TPO in place on this. And then as far as the emergency order, goes that was denied by the judge, and that wouldn't really make sense if there's a lifelong order in place. It's our understanding that police did not provide her with breaking and entering report that would have helped with that emergency order. So there are a number of concerns we're hearing from those close to this woman. Can you please?
So we're going to have a first detention hearing, if it hasn't started by now, at 11:30, where the issues related to the orders of protection will be addressed. There was a lifetime order of protection entered for this woman prior to this man going into prison previously. And so a lifetime order of protection is just that, over the course of her life. And so intervening order of protections do not supersede the lifetime order of protection. And this defendant was fully aware that there was an order of protection against this victim.
Question for the suit. What are your thoughts on just the extent to which electronic monitoring is used, and do you think it's an effective technology?
Well, it depends. It depends on the crime. I'm completely, and this is my personal opinion, when we have violent offenders, I just don't believe in the electronic monitoring. When we give them the opportunity to go out and offend again, this is problematic. There are crimes that are nonviolent and nonviolent offenders, first-time offenders. Electronic monitoring, fine. But when we're talking about someone who engages in just vicious acts of violence, gun violence, repeat offenders, those people should be held. And they should be held because if we know that they've offended before, we can have an idea that they more than likely will offend again. So we need to make sure that we have control measures in place to protect victims. State's Attorney Fox just said it best: prevention. When we talk about bringing justice to a family, that means that the crime has already been committed. It means they've already been victimized. And what we want to do is prevent these things if we can. So whatever measures we can put in place to prevent it, I think that's what we should be doing, especially when it comes to violent crime.
If I may, just really quickly on this issue of electronic monitoring, particularly with domestic violence cases. As I indicated, there are some people who are going to be released. What we want is a system that does not, if they're not going to be held, a mechanism by which we are able to track them. So typically in domestic violence cases, if an electronic monitoring is ordered, it is also ordered with GPS. And the GPS signaling is incredibly important so that if there is an indication that the alleged offender is in proximity of our victims, we need to be able to know that. And so while I recognize the superintendent's concerns about electronic monitoring not being appropriate for everyone, and I certainly would agree with that, we also want to make sure that in instances of domestic violence cases that when that technology is utilized, it's utilized with GPS so that we're better able to track situations in which a potential survivor may be victimized again.
Was there GPS in this case?
I'm sorry.
I'm a little late to the story. Of the understanding that he had an electronic monitor, did that one have GPS on it?
In this case, and again, there'll be a further reading of the proffer at the first detention hearing, he had been on parole. He had been released from parole the day prior to this instance and was at this point required to be on a monitor. I do not believe he had the monitor at the time that this incident happened, but he had been paroled about 24 hours earlier before this happened.